Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Committee of the Whole meeting of Fernie City Council held on September 16th, 2025. Kisu Kukit. We acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of Yakutat Nucleate First Nation. We recognize that we live and work within their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleate and are members of the Ktunaxa-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. A couple of things before we start. This week, the 15th to 21st, is Rail Safety Week, a time when we raise awareness and take action to reduce railway-related incidents in our community. Rail safety is, of course, a shared responsibility, and together we can ensure that everyone stays safe around trains and tracks. As well, starting this week, September 17th to 21st is Elk Valley Pride Week, and we are invited to participate in celebrating our community, welcoming our 2S LGBTQ plus folks, family, and allies from the Elk Valley and beyond to become part of an affirming fun festival in the mountains. You can check ferniepride.ca for details. And finally, September 30th, of course, marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of the residential schools is a vital component of the reconciliation process. September 30th is also Orange Shirt Day, which symbolizes the loss of culture, freedom, and self-esteem that many Indigenous children experienced. Wear orange to honor the truth that every child matters. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. and asked for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation, that the agenda of the September 16th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Ramadas. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the following staff recommendation, that the minutes of the August 19th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Shoesmith, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Is there any discussion? I had to smile when I reviewed them that Councillor Audie Kelly was the only one who voted in opposition to extend the meeting beyond 10 o'clock that evening, which made me laugh when I went back over the minutes.
Close to her not.
With that, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor to public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. A speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to state their full name and community of residence. With that, I will turn to our corporate officer who has our speakers list.
Certainly. Our first speakers today are Majors Rick and Jennifer Robbins.
Welcome.
Got to bring her with me. Thank you. Majors Rick and Jennifer Robbins with the Salvation Army here in Fernie. So we're just here to talk a little bit about Salvation Army has been active here in the community for 125 years. Consecutively, nonstop for those 125 years. And we're looking for the tax exemption this year for our property and our mission work that we do in the community. So we serve approximately 20,000 people, just food in this community. 20,000, it's huge. And this is annually through our weekly programs. And then we also do a lot of emergency clothing vouchers, our Christmas assistance, and emergency disaster services, and much more things that are done behind the scene And a lot of it is due because of what we have in the community and the thrift store that we have that generates funds so that we can serve food to people. And our voucher program that runs out of the thrift store helps people get a fresh start if they've been in an abusive situation. Sorry, I hit the mic, talking with my hands again, but get an abusive situation and they need to change the residence in a hurry, they can come to us. We get clothing, they can get food assistance, they can get furniture, household items. All that stuff is given freely out of our thrift store. And so there's a ministry that happens with the church as well as the community and the community of the whole as well. I'll leave a little bit with Jennifer. She wants to share.
Just in case you didn't know, some of the other things that our thrift store does is regular recycling of clothing that has been on the floor for a certain amount of time, hasn't been purchased, but is still good enough to be bragged out and used in other ways. We also do cardboard, plastic, electronic recycling, and as well as bottles and cans that we receive. We provide volunteer opportunities for high school students, fine option hours for people paying off fines, and also connections for people who want to use their time to give back, and opportunities for people to find gently used, affordable items so they can enjoy them and have another life, and keeping them out of the landfill. And yeah, it's a great place to connect with people. And we provide jobs for between 6 and 8 people full time. And we're glad to work with the people that we do to serve people here in Fernie. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Next, we have Mary Shire.
Good evening, Mary Shire of Fernie, BC. I want to speak to the permissive tax exemption application, which is later on the agenda, that you would continue the exemption for Fernie Fellowship Baptist Church, more commonly known as Mountainside Community Church. I'm a board member there and have been an actively engaged part of the church for 40 years. It is a special place. Its main activity is our weekly church services. And we also benefit the community through our numerous ministries. We take seriously what Jesus meant when he said to love our neighbors. Here are just a few ways that we do that. We invest hugely in youth. We have weekly youth nights for high school aged kids where they can have deeply meaningful conversations and have good, clean fun on a Friday night. If any of you have noticed a huge mob of teens walking along the highway between the high school and the church, it probably means it's Tuesday, free hot lunch day. We provide free hot lunch to high school kids for usually 60 to 80 kids per week, and it's hugely popular. We support young families through our Kids Cafe. We have Tots Drop-In, where the kids can play with each other and make connections, and caregivers can connect over coffee, all again free. We have VBS, our free summer kids camp. We host home support groups, weddings, funerals, children's plays. We have, so many, just a few more numerous programs that we offer our community. Celebrate Recovery for people dealing, these are things that we've done over the years for people dealing with addictions and destructive behaviors. Our Alpha program, offering small group discussions for big spiritual questions of life. Block parties was in response to the post-COVID era when people desperately needed connection. It was really powerful. Our outreach is highly regarded and has formed many community connections. I think this is just one of the byproducts that's happened. Our hot lunch has attracted many organizations and businesses that want to help and volunteer, and they come down and join in and help, which has been great. Our Mexican Mondays, where we offer free burritos during the ski season. We've partnered with the Salvation Army. So lots of these connections have been great. 88 Keys, we house their grand piano, thank you. And they host concerts. Just one of the really cool things is we teach our youth to serve the community, and we've taken our kids to Our youth group goes and helps the ambulance on their annual food drives. Our designer girls help the Fernie figure skatings with their skating carnival. It goes on and on. I've only mentioned a few, but all our ministries are open to the public. Our main church area is accessible for wheelchair users. And it's important to note that we are, our church family provides all of this through many volunteers and generous donations. I hope you support our application for the tax exemption. And I invite you all to join us on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shire.
Next, we have Randall McNair and Jeff McRae, Fernie Citizens Housing Society.
Good evening, Mayor Milligan and Council, and good evening, staff. Thank you for the opportunity to present. We're here on behalf of the Fernie Citizens Housing Society, which operates Trinity Lodge, which I know all of you are familiar with. And we're here to speak to 7.2 permissive tax exemptions bylaw. First of all, actually, I would like to introduce our new manager. Kim Genovese comes to us with a great deal of experience, and we're glad that she's back at Trinity Lodge, as are the residents. So I'll keep it short. You understand what we do, and housing is a key piece of our community infrastructure. And Fernie Citizens Housing Society has been providing affordable housing for over 40 years to 31 units in 31 homes in our community. And specifically, the permissive tax exemption really helps us keep the facility and those homes in the best shape possible. Maintaining a property like that in good nick, if you will, is really critical to the future of maintaining housing, and the permissive tax exemption plays an important role in that. Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. Do you want to?
I would only add the community effect that building has had. I've been on the board for a few years now, and just being in that building with the folks that live there, that is a community. They have they're a family. They talk to each other. They support each other. So having that facility and having that tax exemption really helps us as a board keep that community alive. And they have a tenants fund that they do, like they get together all the time. So just being able to hang out in that building and see those people, it just warms your heart. So, and Nick knows, he has coffee with them. So it's great. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Your Worship. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Next, we have Max Sherwood.
Good evening, all. My name is Max Sherwood, Fernie resident. I'm here on behalf of the Fernie Golf and Country Club to speak to the permissive tax exemption that we've enjoyed for the last several decades, and we're very appreciative of that. We founded in 1918, incorporated as a nonprofit in 1966. We're based on just the overwhelming volunteer support and commitment from club members. This year alone, we've had well over 500 hours committed by volunteers from the club. We enjoy at the present time, from the total of members and people who in the community have frequent flyer cards, 800 people are regular golfers to the golf club. We strive to be able to keep it as affordable as possible. Our rates are among the lowest rates in the Kootenays for membership. We try to make it as accessible as possible. In fact, we have a junior program that offers free golf for juniors through a sponsorship program from the membership. We currently have 125 registered juniors. We provide golf lessons for grades 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in their phys ed programs from the local schools, where this past spring there was 1,250 student lessons delivered. We've We are the host to several different community fundraising events. They're all nonprofits like we are. Events including the Chamber of Commerce fundraising, Bears Paw Contracting Community First Society, various hockey clubs. This coming year, the Ghost Riders want to do a fundraising event with us. And in the past, the Emily Bryden's Youth First Foundation. And we're providing them with a discounted opportunity to be able to use our facility to raise funds for their organization. In the winter months, we partner with the Fernie Nordic Society to provide access to the golf course on groomed cross-country trails for all people who are visiting town or who are members of the Nordic Society. And then on a further note, just how busy we've become with the surgence in golf. We're experiencing almost 30,000 rounds of golf now. And we can attribute about 7,500 rounds of that from people who have traveled from outside the area to golf in Fernie. And if you were to use, I think, a conservative number of maybe $300 a person that they would spend in the local community while here, whether it be accommodation, food, and other activities, that brings in, over $2 million annually to the coffers of town.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Sherwood.
Yeah,
Thanks
great.
so
So I
much.
just want to say thank you for support. And we also know that the water situation in Fernie is dire for supply and demand. And we are working very hard at getting ourselves into a position where we can provide our own water and get off city water at our own expense. So again, thank you for your support, and we could definitely use it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Katie Taylor from the Elk Valley Family Society.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am again speaking to the permissive tax exemption. And I would like to emphasize how important that is to the Elk Valley Family Society. The support allows us to keep rents more affordable for the families and the individuals that we serve. Partnership with the city is key, and it reduces our operating costs through this exemption. We can reinvest this money directly into the housing and create stable and accessible housing in Fernie. Veneto not only provides homes today, but it creates a foundation for us to pursue housing opportunities in the community. And your support helps us maintain affordable housing now, while building capacity to expand housing options in Fernie in the coming years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
And then the last one on our sign-up sheet is Gail Valance from the Fernie Family Housing Society.
Welcome.
I'm sure you know why I'm here. Thanks for letting me speak, Mayor and councillors. We, Fernie Family Housing Society, would like to have an extension on the tax exemption, which we have had on North End Court for the last year. And you're probably aware that we ended up with some deficiencies that were not covered by BC Housing with that project. As a result, the volunteer hours by members of the board, who are all volunteer, is about 20 to 30 hours per week. Now it's fundraising and working on landscaping, etc. So we're not just sitting back waiting for your largesse. We are trying very hard to make up for some of the money that we don't have. We don't have any subsidies on the apartment block at North End Court. The row houses are for low-income families, and the subsidies from BC Housing are only for 8 of those 14 units. So we can't depend on BC Housing for subsidies. So again, just like the rest of the people here this evening, I'm looking for you to consider extending those tax exemptions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Valance. With that, I'll ask, is there anyone online who's indicated? No, seeing none. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time, making the effort to come out. And we'll get to that item shortly in the agenda. But first, we have an introduction by our Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing you to the city's new Manager of Engineering, Nick Pinnell, who started last Monday, September 8th. Nick grew up just outside of Toronto and then attended UBC Okanagan to get his bachelor's in civil engineering. He lives in Fernie with his wife and his 2 children. And Nick has worked at Tech/EVR now at their Elkview operations for more than 12 years. He's held a range of progressively responsible roles from surveyor, site projects coordinator, project engineers, senior civil engineer, and most recently engineering manager for a major capital project, the new Elkview administration and maintenance complex. He has a strong foundation in civil infrastructure systems as well as leadership, and has led the planning and execution of complex infrastructure initiatives, balancing technical, regulatory, and stakeholder considerations. So in his new role with the city, Nick's core responsibilities are the delivery of the development engineering and capital project portfolios and oversight of the engineering team. So we're very pleased that Nick has chosen to bring his skill set and positive energy to our team here at the City of Fernie, and we look forward to his contributions. This is Nick.
Thank you, Ms. Weir. Welcome.
Thanks, Jenny. And yeah, nice to meet you all. And thanks for the great introduction. It's flattering. It's been a really warm welcome. This is the second week here with you guys, and just got to say it's been a really good experience getting to meet all the really capable and energetic folks we have working for the city, and I look forward to servicing the community. And we got lots to learn, but the good news is I have a very capable team to support me. And so I look forward, like I said, to serving the community. Thanks, guys.
Thank you and welcome. With that, we'll move on to item 7.2, the permissive tax exemption bylaw, a report from our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Hello, Council, members of the public. Tonight, as you said, I'm talking about permissive tax exemptions. This last came before Council in June, at which point Council gave direction for myself to reach out to the various groups to reapply for the permissive tax exemption program, which is why we're here tonight. I had this slide back in June, but it defines and gives a bit of clarity on what exactly is a permissive tax exemption. There's 2 types of exemptions defined in the community charter: statutory exemptions and permissive exemptions. Statutory exemptions include properties owned by the province, properties owned by the municipality, properties owned by a public library, or properties owned by a municipality and occupied by a public library, which is the case in Fernie. Hospital buildings, place of public worship buildings. Those are all statutory or automatic exemptions. Permissive tax exemptions, on the other hand, can be granted by council, generally for properties that are owned by not-for-profit organizations, entities providing a municipal service under an agreement. So some examples in Fernie would be the museum or senior center, and everyone that spoke tonight. Not-for-profit seniors and community housing, for example, the land around a hospital or place of public worship that is not otherwise already exempted. The list of properties on this slide that can be granted a permissive tax exemption is not an exhaustive list. The report in your agenda has more detail, but it is a list of examples that currently exist in Fernie. And so with those 2 types of exemptions in mind, there are 2 items that I am asking for direction on from council. Number 1 is our current permissive tax exemption policy, which dates back to 2015, is very short, is not on our official City of Fernie policy template, doesn't appear to be an actually council accepted policy. doesn't have important information like how to apply, due dates for applications, what criteria you have to meet in order to apply, and so on. So included in your agenda, again, is a proposed policy that if council is okay with tonight, will come back to council for approval. It's a fairly generic policy, but it does do a much better job at describing why council can issue exemptions, what the criteria is of those exemptions, again, the process for applying, process the city will follow, and the relevant annual dates in the process. We did discuss this policy at the last meeting in June, and I think council was generally on board with this policy. There was just one piece of feedback on some language. I only had manses defined in there, and there was a suggestion that if we're going to specifically list manses, that we also add rectories and other similar buildings, which I've done. So I'll pause here and see if there's any feedback or questions with the proposed policy in the agenda package. This will come back for council's approval on October 14th.
Questions, comments from council? Councilor Ramirez and then Councilor Hamilton.
Thanks, Your Worship. Is there a reason why all three readings in one sitting, CFO?
The main reason for this is that the permissive tax exemption bylaw must be submitted to BC assessment by the end of October in order to come into effect for the 2026 taxation year. So with the initial report in June, and then the time it takes for me to get in contact with all these groups and for them to apply, this September committee was kind of the most reasonable timeframe to bring this report back. And then that only leaves us within a month and a half till the end of October. So I did consider bringing the bylaw last week for council to give initial readings, but I thought it fit better in committee to get a little more feedback and provide a little more information on the process overall.
Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I'm just double checking that it isn't in the policy, but what is the recourse or the next steps, if you will, if somebody in the list doesn't apply in time and basically their permissive tax exemption relapses or lapses rather? What do we just bill them for property taxes for the year and they have to apply the following year, or what can you walk me through that process with this policy?
So in the event that someone didn't apply in time, which I will talk about in a bit, it would then be up to council what to do with those properties. And if they decided that application was required, if council decides application is required and that's that, then yes, they would get a tax bill for next year, at which point I'm sure our finance team at the city would hear about it, and then I would have to walk them through the process of applying for it next year.
Satisfied? Other questions, comments from council? Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I think Councilor Hamilton stole my question, but I'm just, I was just thinking about this, listening to this public participation tonight, and I think that needs to be said a little bit more than every 10 years, right? So, I mean, I think it would be nice for this application, if anything, the timeline would be sooner so that if there's new people in these chairs in a few years, which there might be, they understand the good work that these people are doing in our community. So that would be my only sort of feedback on that one bit, is not every 10 years, but sooner than that. So
right,
that's about it.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councilor Roddy Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just noticed that the application submission includes a copy of financial statements for the last 3 years. Would that be considered maybe a reasonable time frame so that there would be one application per council term?
That could be one way to approach it for sure. And the term of length is absolutely up to council. And I had a point about that later as well. And while we're on the topic of financials, those are submitted with their application, as you pointed out, but not published. So I did see a lot of those, but there's a lot of information and it would have been a very large package to send to council. So the idea of all those backup forms is really just for me to vet before it goes to council that they are not-for-profits and are following the rules of not-for-profits.
Further?
If you don't mind, your worship, a little bit further to Councillor Hamilton's, just not saying that we're going to, but would there be an appeals process if someone was denied? Would there be an opportunity for them to make an appeal? So not that they forgot to send in an application, but we said, no, we're not giving you an exemption.
If direction like that is given tonight, then the bylaw is going to come back to council October 14th. So then those places could come and speak during public participation, which is not obviously a formal appeal. But then when they get their tax assessment from BC Assessment in January, BC Assessment has its own appeal program, and that's really the only option for appealing assessment value or classification of a property. And sometimes it's rare, but sometimes a permissive exemption can be granted by council, but BC Assessment, for whatever reason, decides it doesn't meet the criteria, and then they will remove the exemption. But the only way a property would know that is by actually reading their property tax notice. So it is still, the responsibility is still on the property owner or the board to read these tax notices and make sure that the exemption has been applied by BC Assessment.
Further? Councillor Ramirez. Sorry.
Thanks, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Nixon's point about the longevity of this, Your Worship. 10 years seems to be quite a long time, wherein in certain situations you can actually look at 3 different councils showing up in that 10-year time frame. Something that is kind of structured around a council's own longevity would be most preferable in my mind.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. Just like a procedural question, kind of thinking about the timeline for reapplication. If the use of the property changed in any such way, would it have to come back for a new application, or would it be kind of, I'm not sure what the proper term is these days, but grandfathered in for the rest of that term?
Just to clarify, use or ownership, or both?
Either or. You know, I'm thinking one of the housing societies, if something happened, it changed, the use had to change, the ownership structure had to change. You know, maybe it's just a different not-for-profit coming in and taking over ownership. Would that property maintain its exemption? Like, I guess more, the question might be better phrased, does the exemption stick with the parcel tax or parcel number, or does it stick, is it attached to the organization operating?
In terms of ownership, that obviously gets registered with BC Land Title, which BC Assessment has access to. So if it does transfer from a not-for-profit to a regular business, they might catch on to that and automatically change the status of the property. In terms of use, I mean, ideally, historically, the finance department hasn't necessarily brought this bylaw back to council every year. We only really do so if we get a new application, because it has been for 10 years. But that could be a way to just revisit the current properties on the bylaw without necessarily triggering a reapplication. And then if anybody on council knows of a change of use, then we can explore the removal of that exemption. But if that check doesn't happen with council and nobody really notices that this use has changed, then it could just keep going. And unless BC Assessment has a lead on that change of use. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but without an annual check, yeah, it could sneak through the cracks if it does change the use.
Further?
So just as a bit of a further, what I think I heard you say is we could structure the policy that it comes back before council every year, but applicants only need to apply once every 10 years unless there is a significant change. That way, you know, a different council with different views and perspective on the situation might trigger a change in the tax exemption and either make everybody reapply or just cancel it.
Yep. could do an annual review, or you could make people reapply every 3 years, as was already discussed, and just review it annually. The length, again, is really up to council.
Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. That just made me, Councilor Hamilton's question made me think. There's a fair amount of data to be kept track of, as Director Bird has pointed out here. I feel like the onus on managing the status and maintaining the relationship for permissive tax exemption, the onus should be on the owner of the property. They should be communicating to us if there is a change. And I just wonder if within the policy and communication to the organization or entity that is applying, if that should be sort of part of the arrangement, is that if we're going to grant a permissive tax exemption based on this application, should the circumstances of that change, you should notify us so that we can review it. And if you don't, then there should be some consequences to that. I believe that the onus should be on the organization, not on us. I think that should be communicated at the time of the exemption.
Yeah, or to your point, the owner of the property, if the organization is renting the property or leasing. Yeah,
whoever that-
yeah, yeah, fair. Councilor Ramon, did you want to speak to that, Mr. Burdett?
That's a great point. I can make sure there's some language in the policy around that. Thank you.
Councilor Ramon?
Thanks, Your Worship. One of those nights where I'm repeating everyone's comments here, and I certainly agree with this. The onus and the effort needs to be on the proponent and not on the city staff. So let's do that. And also in terms of longevity to having an annual review and having this come to the table more frequently rather than 10 years would be my preference as well, Your Worship.
Fair comments. Thank you. Anything else? Councilor McIsaac and then Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you, Worship. While I don't necessarily disagree with a more frequent review of the statuses and so on, I do think it's worth considering the fact that many of the organizations that we are supporting through this have been here for decades. And, recognizing that they have significant longevity and significant investment in the community, I wouldn't want to create a process that is a whole lot more onerous on them. So yes, I think there should be reviews, but a reasonably long period of time between applications and having to come here and make a pitch and all that stuff, I think is appropriate, especially for organizations that have been around for decades.
Sure. Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I was going to say something similar, that I think as part of our policy and processes, we also need to recognize, as we heard, many of these organizations are volunteer driven, and we can't create a process that's going to make it too onerous for the organizations to continue to operate because of onerous requirements. The second question more has to do with our procedure to date. These come before us every year during our tax review and tax rate setting already, do they not? We're just, the organizations aren't coming to present, but we get a list and then we have the chance to review that list. And as you mentioned, if any of us on council or staff are aware of anything that's changed with any of these properties, mention it at that time. And I'm just kind of thinking out loud on my feet here, like how much are we actually changing what we're already doing versus just kind of formalizing it?
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. In the 5 years I've been here, it actually didn't come to council one of the years because we didn't have any new applications, but the other 4 years it did come automatically because there was a new application. So it would be a change to require an annual review.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. Similar concerns about spending people's time. Although from the other side, I was more thinking about our organization as well. Making our CFO jump through a bunch of hoops yearly might be a bit much. There's a lot of things he can be doing. I'm liking the thought that this comes up for review once a term. I'm just wondering why we're talking about 3 years if a term's 4. Did I miss something?
Surprise. Councillor Ida Kelly.
Just to answer Councillor Shoesmith, I had just tied it in, Councillor, to copy of financial statements for 3 years.
Mhm.
So that's where I got that logic. But I'm going to add some more paint and just say that I agree with that. I think annual is too much for both staff and the organizations. I think once per term would be really good. I understand that a new application is going to trigger it, but notwithstanding that.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. While I agree with all these things, it's $250,000. It's not pocket change, right? Just to put it in perspective, $1 million is what we spend on snow removal, for example. This is 1/4 of a department that we are talking about. So while I agree that we don't want it to be like really frequent and make it all onerous, we still have to do the due diligence as elected representatives on a timely basis, is my point, Your Worship. Again, I'm okay with once in a term, but we just have to consider that there is real taxpayer money involved here.
Yeah, which speaks to the question about how often we should be looking at it versus having folks here to talk about it. Because, sorry, Mr. Burnett, are you finished? Like, do you have more slides or? Okay. Why don't you carry on and then?
Sure. I was just pausing to discuss the policy itself.
But sorry, and the draft policy, you're open to feedback because there's some language in there. Well, one section in particular, I wasn't sure I even understood, and that may be my failing. But I certainly provide you that feedback offline.
Yeah, sure. That might. I mean, it's up to you.
No, that's okay.
The second item requesting council feedback on is the current bylaw that was adopted for taxation year 2016 for 10 years, therefore expiring in 2025. This is the list of properties on the current bylaw in no particular order. The total amount of property tax that's exempted for all of these properties is approximately $234,000. I did try to find some data from other municipalities just for reference, more to give council a sense of where these types of policies are trending, but there wasn't a lot out there. One municipality removed exemptions of land surrounding places of public worship. One municipality only exempts its own properties and properties with organizations that they have formal services agreements with. That's just a reference. Ultimately, it's up to this council and their general philosophy on what they'd like to provide exemptions for. It's worth noting, though, that while it doesn't bring in more revenue for the city if you were to revoke an exemption, because the tax that is exempted is paid by all of the other properties in Fernie. So if an exemption is removed, that money that the property would have to pay in taxes is not net new revenue for the city. It just means every other property in town would have to pay a little less. And I have some high level numbers. Again, the entirety of that list is around $234,000 in exempt property tax, which equates to roughly $61 annually for the average single family home. The full list of these properties and their individual 2025 taxation amount is in your agenda package. But just as an example, if council were to remove an exemption for a property that would otherwise pay 10 grand in property tax, that would reduce the amount of tax for an average single family home by roughly $2.60 a year. So every 10,000 is $2.60. And then again, at the last meeting, council directed staff to inform the groups on the previous 2 slides previous to reapply for the renewal of this bylaw. There are 21 properties that received exemptions last year. They're managed by 20 different organizations. One of those organizations manages 2 properties. We were able to contact all of these organizations except for one. That one used to be called Crow's Nest Pass Electric Light and Power Company Limited. That company was the historical name of a company that may or may not have fallen under ENMAX or Direct Energy in Alberta. I wasn't able to find out exactly what happened to it. That property in question doesn't have a proper address, but after a little bit of digging with our planning department, I found out that it's the Grass Island on Park Crescent, which is the last road on the right heading down to the airport before the hill. Just that little cul-de-sac on that road. And then what happened with that property is back in 1951, that parcel of land on Park Crescent was owned by this old power company, and it was subdivided and sold off. On the land titles form, that Grass Island is noted as a private park, but it's actually zoned residential. But this was before we had tools like dedicated parkland. And even if we were to go that route, designate this as parkland, we might not be able to find who owns it to see if they want to do that with it. So long story short, exempting this piece of green space is consistent with our other tax treatment of other green spaces and parks around town. And then of the 19 organizations that we did get in touch with, we received 16 applications for 17 different properties. The 3 that we did not receive applications for were the Catholic Church, Snow Valley Church, which is on 8th Ave, and Interior Health. I'll start with Interior Health. It was extremely difficult to get in touch with the right person at Interior Health. I sent emails and left messages and ultimately thought to use personal contacts in town at the local hospital just to get in touch with a person that was high enough that could maybe help fill out this application. But that contact just happened late last week. So they are working on the application, and I will have that to council before the October 14th meeting. The other 2, I'll continue to encourage them to submit an application between now and October 14th. I am sympathetic to the challenges organizations like these presents, given the nature of their local volunteer board, and they have to deal with national and sometimes international organizations that have ultimate ownership over these properties. But as I said, I'll continue to reach out. And then, so depending on council's direction this evening, if council is wanting to continue on status quo with existing exempt groups, staff would then bring the new policy and new bylaw for initial readings at the October 14th council meeting. It would then be adopted on October 28th. If council wants to consider removing exemptions for any of the properties in your package, I will still prepare the bylaw for October 14th. And if council needs more information on some of them between now and the 14th, I will come prepared with several versions of the bylaw for council's initial readings. Lastly, again, we've already talked about this, but council is able to have discussion on the length of this bylaw as well. It doesn't have to be 10 years. It can be up to 10 years. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Smith, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, the Park Crescent little island there, I'm familiar with it. Do we mow that and maintain it? Like, how does a guy get his property in this loophole where the government doesn't know, can't chase it down? Like,
Well, we do use it for snow storage all winter, like we plow to the center of that crescent, and I don't know if that would be suitable for dedicated parkland, given that we do that, but there's some intricacies there with that piece of land. Further?
I mean, I suppose as long as nobody shows up to complain about snow, we kind of, nothing we can do with it, I guess, eh?
Well, there is the exposure, like if we don't know who owns it and it loses its permissive tax exemption, does it then become a piece of residential land that's suddenly for sale in a tax sale?
I asked this of our planning department, and in theory, yes, someone could, it would generate a tax bill, and I don't have an address to send it to. I would reach out to NMAX and Direct Energy, which is just what I found Googling this name, and maybe someone there knows something about it and could pay the tax bill, and maybe not, and then it would go to tax sale. And because it's zoned residential, in theory, someone could build a house on that island.
Much to the chagrin of the neighbors, I'm sure. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to ask a question about when we should have the discussion about specific timelines for approval of the permissive tax exemption for specific properties. And I'm thinking of places that are in flux now that we're aware of, such as the old tire shop site, colloquially known as the old fire hall site. The Catholic Church has put some of their property up for sale. The Knox Church has changed in function and so on. And so when do we want to have those discussions about individual properties during the bylaw discussion, or do we want to have the discussion now, or when's appropriate? When's the best time?
What's your preference, Mr. Burditt? Do you want to have that conversation now?
Yes.
Okay,
So then,
please.
so then as a follow-up, what is the appropriate action to take where we see that we know that a piece of property is going to change? So but it hasn't changed yet. So for example, in the case of the old fire hall site, would that be one that we would flag as it's strictly a 1 year because we know that a year from now it's going to have a commercial component and it's going to have a number of different titles on it, right? And so it should, if there is going to be a permissive tax exemption application, it should come from that, whatever that new organization is that's going to own that property and for the specific titles that they want to apply for. Is that a reasonable way to resolve that?
Yeah, I don't think it would have distinct titles because it'll be one owner and one mortgage holder, but it would have difference in use. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There would be a
So
commercial
like, for
space.
example, I don't want to presuppose council's position on this, but we'd want to be probably pretty careful about giving permissive tax exemptions to a commercial.
To a business, yeah, understood.
With respect to that property, there will be a portion that's commercial is the plan. And I am going to have to check with manager, acting director Similini on if that gets subdivided, if there's different parcels that are commercial and different parcels that are residential. Because if that's the case, it would just be automatic in BC assessments books. And then we wouldn't have to tell them that that happened. But if it's just like stratified, I would have to check with him on exactly how to explore that. So I can bring that back for council on the 14th.
Or
back to that property.
If it's one landlord, not stratified, but they're renting out a commercial space to a business, that changes the dynamic as well.
Yeah, and we have examples of that. For example, the golf course rents out their restaurant and they pay property tax on that portion of that building.
Yeah. Which does raise, and I certainly don't mean to pick on anybody here, but there is a portion of the Salvation Army building complex that is currently, appears to me to be rented out to a commercial interest, not related to the Salvation Army. They're the urban settler. So presumably that would change the dynamic in that circumstance.
Yeah, presumably. That was also brought to my attention last week at publication, and that's another one I'll have to follow up on and get back to council on the 14th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Ramirez.
Circling back to this grass island on Park Ave, Mayor Milligan brought up the notion of exposure, and I'm curious if we don't know the actual owner, are we at any risk of any sort of liability exposure? If we're using it for snow storage or any such other uses, what does our potential liability look like in that situation?
I'll have to bring that information back to you.
Further?
And yeah, I guess all that is leading to, would it be appropriate to look at expropriating that land for parkland, for snow storage specifically? And I'm curious what that might look like if we don't actually know who we're expropriating it from.
Mr. Boranowski?
If I can, my sense is that has in effect been donated to the community as green space. I probably wouldn't look at expropriation. I would probably look at a tool to recognize that donation with the appropriate owner once we're able to find who they are. But I think the first piece of business that remains ongoing and remains active is tracking down some sort of paperwork to prove ownership, or in effect, whether it's become property of the municipality after all these years. So there's just work ongoing.
Councillor Ramadus?
Thanks, Your Worship. As I was thinking through this in the last couple of minutes, I was just wondering, like, what's the connection between this policy and, say, OCP or our council strategic plan? Like, is there one, or is it something that we need to work out here? And the reason I'm asking here is, I see a bunch of applications here, right? There's housing society, there is places of worship, there is charitable organizations, and then there is golf club, right? I'm not saying golf club doesn't provide value to the community, but I just want to understand, like, what's the, like, is there something that we can actually anchor towards so that the applications are consistent with our other policies?
Yeah, and I think it's actually highlighted in the report because it's anchored to council's desire to improve the quality of life for citizens in Fernie, and therefore supporting organizations that support the quality of life in Fernie is the anchor. But it does raise the question, you know, and I'm not suggesting it would be this way, but if a future council, if that isn't a priority for a future council, presumably the bylaw or the policy would have to change that anchor, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yep. But I mean, future council, as you said, if this is a bylaw or policy that they want to visit, they can certainly direct me to do that.
Mr. Barnowski?
There's obviously a linkage to the section the mayor noted in council strategic plan that's quoted in the report. When you lens out and look at the official community plan, my read, and it's council's document as much as anybody else's, so I would encourage you to check me on this or check my read on this, but my read is that plan talks a lot about the activities and amenities that Fernie boasts and our ability to drive a more diverse economy outside of resource extraction because of those and the quality of life in the community. And it does speak to working with the golf club explicitly around water and wastewater and stormwater runoff. But in terms of having that amenity in the community, I think there's a logical tie to then defining what a partnership is and whether that partnership is limited to a permissive tax exemption with that not-for-profit society. And if council then feels that that's a sufficient partnership to stabilize the longevity of that community asset, which is itself recognized in the OCP.
Other questions, comments? Looking at the existing bylaw, and it lists all the properties, of course, and everyone who's lists the properties and the societies. But I'm curious about toward the end where it talks about, and forgive me, it talks about leased municipal property, of which we, of course, have many. But it also lists a series of properties on Fifth Avenue where the Catholic Public School of Nelson Diocese has applied for the exemption, but it's listed as city property. Is that just an error?
Which page are you at, Your Worship?
Sorry, it's because I likely download the agenda differently. It's, and mine, it's page 4 of the bylaw, at the bottom of the bylaw.
Yeah, those three I think are just under the wrong subheading, as you pointed out. They should be in the upper section of the old bylaw. But as this bylaw dates back to 2016.
Yeah,
so,
no, fair enough.
Yeah,
but I guess it falls, it falls on our shoulders as well. If we've seen this because properties have been added, because there's also the Fernie Heritage Trust Society property, which is a Knox United Church, which is not a city property under the same heading. So just some stuff that needs to be cleaned up.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. It's a
And the
good catch.
revision of the bylaw. Okay. Any other questions, comments? There, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. So, my understanding of this is before we we had a bylaw, but we didn't really have a policy that guided it. It was just sort of a kludgy hodgepodge. And now that we're bringing out a new policy here, and having read it, it makes a lot of sense to me. There's nothing in there crazy or objectionable. But I do wonder, as this policy is implemented, my read is that it will just wind up skewing pretty close to status quo. But is there any real change or direction or anything? What has anybody else got a read on it that says there's any big change or anything like that? Because my understanding of it is more or less this is just business as usual, status quo kind of thing.
That's correct, but it's just having it on paper, and so people can find it on our website and read when they have to apply by and what they need to include as part of their application.
Fair. Yeah, on that note, and I guess I will ask the question now because we're talking about the proposed permissive tax exemption policy. Under eligibility criteria, 1 sub I, well, I guess it's 1 sub 1. A property may be eligible for exemption if the applicant meets all the following criteria. Is the registered owner of the property or a tenant under a lease requiring it to pay taxes directly to the city and organizations that provide any business, service, or facility that will compete with privately owned pre-existing businesses? What does that even mean? Like, is there a word missing that I'm not missing? It seems to me that you're saying any organization that provide any business, service, or facility that will compete with privately owned pre-existing businesses.
You're on the bottom of page 14.
Sorry, I'm on page 2 of 4 of the draft policy, and I don't know where that is in the full agenda.
Page 14.
So it's eligibility criteria 1 sub 1.
I think you're right. I think I think I've missed a word there. So I will make note of that clause and clean it up for the 14th.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
no problem.
I just really stumbled. I read it several times and tried to make sense of it. And there are, not to be picky, there are a couple of typos I'll provide you feedback on as well, Mr. Burden.
Sure, thanks.
Other questions, comments from council? Seeing none, I will ask our corporate officer to read the recommendations.
Staff recommendation number 1 is that committee directs staff to bring back the permissive tax exemption policy number 2025-02 for approval by council.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Staff recommendation number 2, that committee directs staff to prepare a new permissive tax exemption bylaw for council's consideration and first, second and third readings at the October 14, 2025 regular meeting of council.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? Sorry, Mr. Burdick, can you just remind us to Councillor Ramadas's earlier question, first, second and third readings, October 14th, because
the bylaw has to be adopted and submitted to BC assessment by the end of October in order to kick in for the 2026 tax year.
Thank you. Councillor Ramadas?
Thanks, Your Worship. And the reason I asked that question was I understand the time crunch here. Completely appreciate, and we have packed agendas every session here, and I know this has come last minute kind of. But the reason I am more comfortable with having separate readings is just that gives us that opportunity to have a sober second thought. And even if it is, pretty transactional or very high level, that is fine. But just a week of time between, say, one reading to another reading just gives us an opportunity to really absorb, and also gives opportunity to the folks that are affected by this and the community in general to have that opportunity to, ask questions. So,
Mhm.
and that's the only reason I asked that. But fair, this is, you're under time crunch and okay for 3 readings to happen in one session.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. Any other discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. We will now move on to item 8.1, and I'll ask our corporate officer to read that staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation is that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 91G of the Community Charter, as the subject matter being considered at this time relates to litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality.
Mover, Councillor Shoesmith, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous.